Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to my Origin series. It will probably come as not a big surprise to a lot of you that this, Fuller's London Pride, would feature on my Origin series. And for those of you watching for the first time, well, my Origin series is me looking back at beers that were kind of formative in my initial appreciation for the brewing art form, and this is definitely one of them. Why is this one of them? Well, to be honest, this was a steady, always available hand pull option down my local between the ages of 18 and 25, I'd guess, maybe less actually. But anyway, you get the idea. Those kind of years, there was always there to fall back on if nothing else tickled my fancy. And for those of you that don't know what this is, well, it's a 4.7% amber ale. I'm sure the ABV has changed a host of times in different formats, but yeah, right now, 4.7% in this bottle, and it's called an amber ale. I'd call it really, it's a slightly more exciting best bitter is where I'd seat it, but hey, it's solid, it's decent, or at least it was. And part of this series is to find out whether or not these beers are still any good today, or should they be ignored completely. So we better find out, hey? Before we break into it, here is a quick look at the bottle. It's a very tall bottle, this one. It's a bit awkward for the beer fridge, it has to be said. Long and slender. On the front there, Fuller's London Pride, outstanding amber ale. Load of info on the back, as you would expect from a pretty largely produced beer. Even got a Premiership Rugby tie in there, so we'll go into that a bit later, I'm sure. But yeah, 500ml bottle, 4.7%. Let's get it open. Gone for a straight up pint glass this time. Kind of suits the bottle at the very least. So then, actually this is lighter than I remember. Maybe this is definitely not best bitter territory. I remember this being, yeah, as I said before, like a more interesting best bitter, but actually, looking at it now, can you see there? Hold it up there. It's yeah, it's definitely more amber or golden coloured, really. It's definitely not solid brown. That head looks pretty disappointing, I'm not going to lie. Maybe it was my pour, but well, it normally ends up going the other way with me. So yeah, that's pretty sad to see. There's a bit of carbonation in there, just as much as you'd expect, really. You can probably see it peeking through. It looks okay in the glass. I mean, it's crystal clear, incredibly clear beer. Again, as you'd probably expect for the type and the style and the brewery and that sort of thing. But other than the dog hair that always makes its way into my videos, yeah, not the best, but maybe it'll be okay on the flavour. So, aromas. Very, very clean. A little crisp, a little fruity in places. It's got almost a summer berry kind of aroma to it, and a bit of the malt comes through on the nose as well. It's reasonably subdued, but it smells pretty appealing if I'm honest, and that's really all I can give you. So let's get into it. Cheers. Maybe I should have been a bit more aggressive on the pour because, well, there's not a lot of carbonation in the glass, but as soon as it hits your mouth, it's going off. So as we get a little bit further down this, I'll try and move it around and settle it down a touch. But first impressions, it's pretty much quintessential traditional beer, to be honest. It's pretty thin, but pretty refreshing. Malty, fruity. The aroma translates completely to flavour on this, and there's a proper start bitterness to let you know that this is not anything clever, modern or fancy. This is old school British ale in its purest form, and I do have a soft spot for that, but I'm not sure right now, in bottle form at least, that this is really rekindling that love at all. There's nothing wrong with it, but, well, I say that. It's maybe a little too bitter, a little too, yeah, there's a pretty aggressive citrus note creeping in on the back end now, and it doesn't feel wholly balanced. And to be honest, they're pretty minor things. Beer produced at this kind of capacity, we're not expecting heaps of brilliant mouthfeel and a thick beer. It being a bit sloshy is exactly what I understood it would be, and a slightly overshot bitter back end again. Pretty much standard for this type of beer, this style. But I think the real problem is not that there's heaps and heaps bad with it or wrong with it, but there's just not a whole lot of greatness either. To try and explain what I'm talking about, let's do a quick top to bottom taste test. So, initially, now I'm analysing it, actually, right at the front of the tongue, it's quite enjoyable. It's light, sweet, a bit of carbonation, a bit of the malt comes through on the front of the tongue, which I have to say is not something I've said about a lot of beers, so at least it is doing something a touch different. And then prickly carbonation on that second phase, but there's not a lot of flavour there at that point, I'll be honest. Mid palate, a bit of the bitterness creeps in. Sucked at a few fruity notes. It continues this very refreshing theme, to be honest. It's almost fruit spritz at that point, and then really not a lot happens until you swallow it, at which point big, sharp, bitter hit right at the back of the mouth, makes you tabs laugh, that sort of thing. It's quite aggressive, a bit of a citrusy note. Some of those fruits come back through, and long term on the aftertaste, you do get a nice bit of residual bready malt, but the problem is it's also accompanied by a very prolonged, not easily removed, slightly overly bitter sensation, which, again, is not unusual for the beer style, but it's just a little bit too much for everything else that's going on. It's dominating. The amount of bitterness on its own isn't an issue. It's just that there's not really a lot there to complement it with. Right then, let's take a very quick look at the bottle. So on the front it says Fuller's London Pride Outstanding Amber Ale on the top. It's also got another mention of Premiership Rugby, as I said before, which we'll get into in a moment if it gives us any information, which it does, and it just simply says they are the official beer partner of Premiership Rugby, so good to know. I actually wasn't aware of that. It says support with pride, and it goes on to say it takes skill, dedication and time to brew an ale this outstanding. It takes the same to play Premiership Rugby. Okay, they're really driving this one home. I think it probably, well, anyway, let's not criticise too much. The bit you need to know though, the ingredients are water, malted barley and hops. That's it. So it's a pretty clean beer by all accounts. There's 2.4 UK units in this 500ml bottle. The best before on it's the 1st of November, so well, best part of 11 months away. It's certainly a pretty fresh bottle, and there's not a lot else to say. The bottles do have this nice engraving on the bottom here. You see that? We will try and read it out. It says, from the Griffin Brewery. So technically, I guess it's Fuller's London Pride, but the Griffin Brewery is actually the name of Fuller's Brewery. It's a bit complicated. But yeah, it's a nice little touch. But what we need to say is this still any good? And I have to say, in this format, it's just not balanced enough. It doesn't have off flavours. It's not absolute dross, but it is a bit thin, as we expected. It is a bit one-dimensional, as expected. But I can see past those things. But what I'm left with is just something a touch too bitter. And the thing that's most annoying is those light fruity notes, the berry notes, and that malt base is actually very, very good. It's very enjoyable, very palatable. Really, I really like it. But it's not strong enough, and it just gets killed off by that big bitter swipe. So for me, unfortunately, Fuller's London Pride goes in the no pile, which I think might be the first one we've had so far. But anyway, it's a shame. I will finish the pint though. It's not absolutely horrific. It's just I shan't be bothering again. And that is all I've got to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already subscribed, if you will be so kind. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.